All right. So yeah, thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited about this event. Hopefully you are as well. It's likely the industry's first and only InsurTech investment-focused event, and I'm really focused on learning how investors invest in InsurTechs in earliest stages to all the way to IPO. So we hope it'll be an informative event for all of you, whether you're an InsurTech raising your next round, investors looking to learn how other investors invest, or carrier brokers interested in learning what is the deal with this exponential growth of InsurTech investments over the past couple of years. So we first want to thank all of our sponsors who have made this event possible today. Let me share a bit about them. Thompson and Prince is a brand strategy and design consultancy that offers creating logo design, website design, all the way to marketing materials for startups. Lock & Lord is a premier full-service law firm that has been representing startups, emerging business, and Fortune 500 leaders in the insurance and reinsurance industries for over 100 years. And finally, Avant Ventures is a venture capital arm of CSA Insurance Group, a AAA insurer, investing in early stage opportunities that leverage novel data sources and innovative business models to create competitive advantage across InsurTech, mobility, and insurance adjacent sectors. Thank you again to all of today's event's sponsors. For some of you who are new to our event today, we do a number of things to help the InsurTech ecosystem in New York and beyond. We do this by providing innovation educational events throughout the year, an opportunity to promote the best startups in the world through our accelerator and competition. Our next public event actually will be a short webinar, which we're working with Lock & Lord on June 9th on non-admitted insurance market, followed by our regular full virtual event in August on core systems and claims. Later in the year, we'll likely move back to doing things in person, crossing my fingers. So hope to see many of you in person finally in our October and November event. And we're also going to open up applications for the Growth Stage Startup Accelerator on June 28th. And we'll share more when the time comes through our newsletter, LinkedIn, and other mediums. So the agenda today is the following. We'll start with our first panel, where we'll learn from early stage investors on how and why they invest in super early stage startups in a pre-seed to seed stage. And then we'll hear from an InsurTech founder on how he raised Series A. Then we'll also hear from several corporate VC investors and what goes through their mind when they're investing in startups. Finally, we'll end the speaking session with how InsurTechs get to public markets. It's a full cycle of InsurTech investments you're getting today. So following the speaking sessions, there will be ask anything to investors and networking, which I'll talk about in a bit. Speaking of investors, in partnership with Tilburg University, we're conducting a survey-based research on carriers and brokers who make startup investments. Our preliminary findings suggest that there are 120 carriers and brokers who made at least one startup investment in the past decade plus, and they collectively made close to 1,900 investments. That's a lot. So we'll get to deeper insights later, such as how are these organizations typically organized? Do they invest out of balance sheet, or do they have a separate investment group, or do they actually invest through other funds? What is a typical org structure and fund size? Trends. So we get to a lot of these insights, and we'll plan to share highlights of these findings later in the year publicly, and then we'll do a deep dive in our private executive briefing in October for our members in the innovation program. But if you want to actually talk to some of these insurance CVCs before our findings, you can actually do that today. So we have 14 of the best investors from carriers and brokers participating today in the Ask Investors Anything section of today's event, starting at 3 p.m. Collectively, they had made 20% of the total, more than 20% of 900 startup investments that I showed earlier. So that's a lot. So it's a really solid group of investors that you probably want to talk to if you're a startup. And you can visit each of these companies and talk to the investors in the respective floors that you see here. Now with that, let me hand it off to Master MC Roy Hansraj, who'll start with the introduction of the first panel.
Thanks, Tony. Some of you guys might remember me from our last InsurTech Summit, or even from your DMV videos, training videos, but hopefully not there. But enough about me. Let's go over straight to this first panel. And let me start by introduction with Brian. He's a senior principal with the innovation team at Greenlight Re, where he evaluates technologies and their applications to reinsurance with the aim of partnering and developing new startups. He also serves as the board of directors for Battleface, Cove Insurance, Leap, Sana Benefits, and Cotier. We also have Adam. He's a VP of at NFP Ventures, investing in digital health, InsurTech, and fintech companies. He was previously a VP at BWD Group, an insurance group specializing in sports and entertainment industries. We also have Rashad. He's a corporate VP at New York Life, focused on analytics innovation, and he's also an adjunct professor of analytics at Mercer College. Smart guy. He's also an angel investor who support up to 70 plus startups, both directly and through syndicates. Lastly, let me hand over to Andrew here, who will be moderating. He's the global head of InsurTech at Willis Towers Watson, and he's focused on conducting analysis of global third-party InsurTechs and their ecosystems. He formerly served as cyber and fintech specialist there at Willis. But let me pass it to Andrew in this early start of this summit on the early stage investment work. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Roy. Can everyone hear me okay? Am I coming through okay? Yeah. Yeah, great. So thanks everyone for joining, and thank you very much to InsurTech New York for inviting me and for the great panel we have today. I'm going to ask some questions, and hopefully we're going to get some great answers from these three sort of keen investors, and then there'll be some time for Q&A as well at the end. So the first kind of bucket of questions will sort of list under opportunities and industry outlook. And Rashad, if I can begin with you, you've made angel investments in InsurTech and in other industries. How does InsurTech compare to the other industries, and where do you see the largest opportunity set in early stage InsurTechs?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks Tony and David for organizing this. This is great, and also I love what you guys are doing. So kudos to you. So I've made investments through various industries. InsurTech, we're still right. If you compare InsurTech, say, to social media is currently on its third iteration. First starting with Facebook, MySpace, social media 1.0, and further changes there with Facebook as well as Twitter, and then various other segmentation there, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. And more recently, we see some of those trends kind of converging in social media 3.0, like with TikTok and BitCloud. If you haven't heard about BitCloud yet, you will probably in the next couple of months. So it's very interesting, right? We're in the third iteration of social media. In comparison, InsurTech, we're still at 1.0. Sure, there have been some early successes with like Lemonade, Roots Insurance, Oscar, but the size of the market is massive, even when you chop it up into different segments. And we're nowhere near, to maturity. So even in 1.0, I think it's still in the early days.
But Rashad, in terms of where do you see the largest opportunity though for the early stage right now?
Yeah, I think, we're trying to do the foundational stuff is digitizing the experience. I think the winners will be, companies that are using data to personalize their service and product. I think we see some early sign of that. And there's also new segments, emerging, right? For example, crypto insurance is a very interesting deciding about crypto, there are like a multi-trillion-dollar asset class, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. I see additional opportunities, cyber insurance. I love what Cowbell Cyber and Jack and team are doing there, using machine learning with their product suite. So a lot of opportunity, and I think we're going to see new product innovation as well, because once you start using data to personalize service, you'll see product innovation that the industry as a whole haven't thought of. As far as product innovation goes, insurance has been kind of lagging.
Thank you. And so it sounds like you think the opportunity is both sort of improving the traditional part of our business, but also bringing in things that are quite revolutionary and contemporary. Brian and Adam, I'm going to ask you sort of a question together, if that's okay.
Sure.
You've both been actively investing for several years now. How does the startup creation rate look now compared to, say, 3 years ago? And in your experience, what are the hot areas and the biggest opportunities right now? Perhaps we can start with you, Brian.
Cool. Yeah. So certainly, I mean, Willis Towers Watson puts out a nice report that highlights a lot of the activity. Plug for Andrew. And there's
Thanks,
yeah, it's certainly shown, you know, the increase in deal activity. But I think that's certainly reflected by one. You know, I see that on our side. Greenlight Re's made 15 investments in the last 3 years. We kind of set up the unit 3 years ago. So we've made a lot of investments, but we've also seen a ton more opportunities. I think our top of funnel is just as strong as it has been from the start. And, you know, it's really interesting to see, you know, the public InsurTechs that have really generated a buzz around this space. I think, you know, a year ago, there was a little uncertainty as what's going to happen when these InsurTechs go public. Are they going to get justified valuations, or are they going to stick around? And I think that's only going to increase the interest in the space, given that they've maintained valuations at pretty healthy and attractive multiples. And I think that's being reflected in, you know, the opportunities that we're coming across. There's still a lot of interest in the space. Couple trends that I'm seeing, I'd say, are and maybe directed by some of our focus, is a shift from kind of personal lines to commercial lines, just given the expense base there and how much opportunity there is for efficiency gain. In addition, I think there's a reduction or take back of the idea that the entire industry needs to be disintermediated. So I think there's more leveraging brokers rather than trying to get rid of them entirely. So I think it's a key thing that happened over the last 3 years. I think there was a handful of folks that said, hey, brokers should never exist, and I think that's gone.
Here we are. Here I am. I didn't disappear.
Yeah.
Makes two of us.
Yeah, you too, Adam.
Yeah.
Adam, same question to you. Thanks, Brian. That was a great answer.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add, because Brian, I think, hit all the important pieces. The thing that I will say is Rashad's right. It's taken insurance a very long time to innovate, and there's probably good reason for that. But the reality is, here we are in 2021. A lot of other industries have been impacted positively by technology, and here we are, a large, growing, very important industry that is insurance, hundreds of billions in premium annually, ripe for disruption. And so we've seen MGAs, we've seen stuff on the personal line side. To Brian's point, disintermediation for the most part has been thrown out the window. And so we're seeing a handful of companies enabling brokers, enabling incumbents, which is great, again, for us to see, being associated with a large national broker. But the other interesting piece that I'll bring up is embedded insurance. And I do want to be careful with embedded insurance. I think a lot of folks come in, look at insurance and say, embedded insurance is going to reimagine every portion of insurance as we know it. Let's move on to the next industry. And so the reality is, sure, embedded insurance is going to play an important role in our industry going forward. Is it going to solve every problem? No. But for Andrew's question, for purposes of Andrew's question, what I'd say is embedded insurance brings incredible opportunity to InsurTech investing. Just within the last month, I've spoken to, of course, we'll get into this later in the panel, companies that are selling software to insurance incumbents. But within embedded insurance world, if you will, I've spoken to a company that is selling software to the towing industry. I've spoken to a company that is selling software to meal prep companies, and then obviously a property management company, which is sort of understandable. But point being, all of which are interested in potentially standing up an insurance offering, which is where the four of us potentially come into play. And from an investment perspective, again, it opens up incredible opportunity that I think 3 or 4 years ago we could never imagine. So really looking forward to taking a look at more of that stuff going forward.
Thank you. And sort of tying those 2 points together from yourself and Brian, I mean, as InsurTechs are looking at, say, commercial lines, there's obviously potentially bigger rewards there, but you've got to kind of almost respect the existing landscape. And a lot of that business has historically been intermediated for good reason. And it's in part because you have got to have that kind of human experience, but also invariably commercial lines consumers will actually understand their risk very, very well, right? And so it's almost understanding the coverage as well. So I guess on that point, Adam, back to you. P&C is still by far the kind of leading vertical, I guess you could call it, in InsurTech relative to life, accident, and health. Certainly from an investment perspective, to the tune of about 80-20. But within the scope of P&C, you've obviously just given us a sort of few examples of where you're focusing. But where do you think a lot of investors are focusing within P&C? And then specifically as it relates to what you're doing at NFP, do you think that brokers are considering investments different from, say, risk originators or other type of risk-bearing entities?
Yeah. So the way we think about it at NFP is there's 3 buckets of companies that we look at. The first is internal facing. So these are companies that I alluded to before, software companies selling to insurance incumbents. And so that comes in all different shapes and sizes, streamlining the data collection process, digitizing the rate quote bind experience. We're talking to more and more companies that are automating portions of the servicing aspects of insurance, talk about an unsexy area of an already pretty unsexy business. But incredible
What are you saying, Adam?
Yeah. But we're also looking at retention, cross-sell, upsell, identification companies, again, in that internal bucket. So that's, I'd say, bucket number 1. The second are external facing companies. These are technologies, solutions that we can sell alongside an insurance policy. So I guess we sometimes call them risk management technologies. And so I think gone are the days, at least within brokerage world, for the more complex stuff on the personal line side that will not get disintermediated anytime soon. Gone are the days where we're going to be pushing paper and just focusing on brokering and insurance policy. Sure, that's going to be table stakes. Sure, you're going to be experts and need to be able to do that, provide the most competitive terms and conditions for your clients. But we're transitioning to a world where you have to do more as a broker. You have to do more as a risk management consultant advisor. And so part of that is staying up to speed with the latest related to proactive risk mitigation. And so a handful of buckets come into play on this side of the house. Prop tech companies that align, in NFP's case, with our real estate group. Construction tech companies, again, focused on risk mitigation that aligns with our construction practice. Within transportation, you have telematics and fleet management software. The list goes on and on and on. And so within NFP, we have 20 specialty verticals on the P&C side. What we try to do from a venture and innovation perspective is align those sorts of innovative companies with what we're doing as a broker. And then the last bucket, and then I'll quickly move to the last question, Andrew, related to carriers, how they look about the world differently. But the last bucket within NFP, dynamic insurance. Innovative MGAs, which Brian alluded to, but also embedded insurance falls under that bucket too. And to the extent NFP could help stand up these offerings, those are opportunities we very much like taking a look at. And then, on the carrier side, Andrew, to your point, it just depends on what you do as a core business. So NFP, we're risk management consultant advisors. And so there are companies on the technology side that make sense from an organic vantage point to insert into our sales cycle to, again, impact risk mitigation. And for carriers, a totally different ballgame. There's some overlap there, but then you also get into some more claim-specific tech, which we see a ton of, less relevant for brokers, more relevant for carriers. Underwriting automation, sort of the same thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So, I think what I'm hearing really is that you're looking to support businesses that really support your core business. And perhaps what I've seen, certainly in my experience through the sort of Willis Towers Watson lens, is that the focus is less and less on the technology as a product. It's more on the technology or the technology firm as a means of achieving success criteria that might actually mirror a traditional business model.
100%.
And so wherever you look in the value chain, there will be technology as a means to achieve that traditional success criteria. And that's actually personally been a very refreshing experience, because people aren't now sort of coming into meetings and saying, well, it's blockchain, and sort of saying, what impact does that have on my business? Oh, but it's it's got AI, right? And people are less trying to sell the product. And I think that's been a really positive iteration. So sort of moving through the sort of labyrinth of where we want to focus. let's talk about, judging the actual teams themselves when you're looking to invest. And I'm sure, we've got lots of people on the call who are looking for investment or are entrepreneurs or nascent businesses, and this is going to be a really important area to focus on. So Brian, if I could start with you, founding teams of InsurTechs and sort of early stage businesses in general are quite often missing one or sometimes two important components to bring a product or a tool to market. In your experience, what do you think is an acceptable gap, and how can you as a business help to fill that gap? Any sort of information around your investment mandate would be great as it relates to founding teams.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the gap can be quite wide, but I guess one thing I like to think about when talking to founders is understanding whether they've been humbled by the insurance industry before. Do they understand how complex it is and how long it takes to get products to market? The more they understand it and acknowledge that, hey, we need help, we need partners, the more I'm going to lean in and engage further. The ones that think that they can solve it with a quick fix and they've got everything figured out all at once, that's where I struggle. And so certainly coachability and the willingness to acknowledge weaknesses. Yeah. I think those are really strong selling points for me, sitting where I sit. Typically, we invest in MGAs and look to provide reinsurance capacity. So we see ourselves as part of the puzzle. We're going to be helping them actually get to market by providing capacity and advisement. And we do things like we help them build their financial models. We review their actuarial work. We provide advice on claims. So we see ourselves as kind of helping fill that gap. But I like to see early on that the founders understand what it takes to get an insurance product to market, and that timelines are realistic, financials are realistic, and they're willing to work with someone like us.
And as a plug to your business, I mean, you are definitely one of the greatest games in town in terms of offering both that sort of operational trampoline, but also providing risk capacity as well as in that kind of hybrid support model, which we've seen be very successful for some of our clients as well. We have a lot of clients that work with you as well. And so I'm sort of hearing that, humility, openness is sort of really important things when you're factoring in what to invest in. Rashad, if I could sort of turn to you, a healthy ecosystem requires a steady flow of strong founders to create these early stage companies. How can we, as the insurance and reinsurance community, help founders and early stage companies before they're ready for their sort of prime time launch? What advice can we give them?
Yeah, the ecosystem is very important, right? See, in the space you're playing in, and it's important to understand the need of startups at different stages. A need for a pre-seed, seed stage startup is totally different than, say, like an A or B series startup. Ecosystem could make and break the company, right? Especially if you're a B2B founder. That one connection, one introduction to someone, the existing enterprise, could make or break your company. So I personally kind of go out of the way to make those kind of introduction because it's so key. Early stage companies, also require subject matter expertise, right? They may be coming in from different industry or rental industry. They may not understand everything about insurance. Insurance is a complex area. So being able to tap into the network and the ecosystem to get those kind of support is key. It's not only the capital. I think it's the expertise and the network support that exists to kind of support you, kind of get to the next stage.
Sure.
To Tony and David's credit, like again, re-emphasizing the fact that they're creating this ecosystem to support founders is great.
Yeah, and if I could ask you, if you could give the community a score out of 10, what sort of a job do you think we've done to date?
Well, it's still early, right? I think it was like this is year 2, so I think there's a lot of growth opportunities out there. I'd probably put us at like 6 or 7.
Okay, that's good.
We've still got a long ways to go. I love to see some unicorn coming out of this our ecosystem here. I think that'll be a good win for us.
Thanks, Rashad. That was great. And then finally to you, Adam, for pre-revenue or sort of one customer startups, early stage startups, there's not often a lot for an investor to actually evaluate a business against beyond theoretical. So beyond that kind of term sheet or whatever you can base it on, what are you looking for as an investor? Is it just the team, or is it other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, at that stage, it's definitely a lot the team. Obviously, the opportunity is important, but I'd like to hang out with my fellow panelists more after this panel, because we see eye to eye with a lot of this stuff. We over-index, and we demand that these companies over-index on their insurance experience. The reality is change is going to happen from within this industry. Sure, we need technologists that come from outside the industry with a fresh perspective, but the nuances of the industry, the intricacies of how things work on the MGA side, to Brian's point, if you're an enabler working with brokers and carriers, the closer aligned you are, the more expertise you have on your team, full stop, the more likely you will be in terms of your success out of the gate. So it's something we spend a ton of time on with these teams with barely any product.
Right, that's great. Adam, just conscious of time, I'm going to sort of go through a couple more questions with you all before we sort of go into sort of more generic questions. But if the three of you could be relatively brief with these next three questions, that would be great. And this is really around supporting investments. And so, Brian, if we could start with you. Corporate VCs, or CVCs as we know them, often balance a commercial relationship with an investment decision. Which typically comes first? Is it the commercial relationship that comes first, or is it the investment that comes first? And in that instance, why would that be from your perspective?
Yes, I'd say generally the investment comes first. We operate more in the seed stage, so this is, companies aren't in market yet, so we're kind of helping them to get to market. But what I often say to MGAs and startups, at that early stage, is that there's two fundraise processes. There's an investment fundraise and there's a capacity fundraise. Right. And without a doubt, without fail, the capacity fundraise is going to take way longer, and there's way less available capital on the capacity side. So I kind of emphasize that early on. The ones that understand that are obviously the ones that are going to be open to kind of our value proposition. So, we look at opportunities side by side. If there's not a strong underwriting opportunity, then it's going to be hard to justify making an investment, because in the end, Greenlight is looking to make reinsurance relationships where we're generating business for Greenlight Re, and we can do that by supporting early stage MGAs. But if it's not profitable, then that's going to be hard to justify continued support, and it's going to be hard to find other partners to reinsure and help these companies expand into other markets. So it's very critical that we buy into the underwriting philosophy and that the expected margins are achievable. So that's kind of how we look at it. It's one and the same. You can't really separate the two. Now, we are in a fortunate spot where if there is a reinsurance opportunity, we can look at that and then switch to an investment conversation. And so I say that on balance, it's usually investment first, but certainly later stage ones, we can entertain that. I think that's kind of core to our value prop.
I guess you're in this great spot in that you really are focused on sort of risk originating InsurTech, which seems to be the space that's maturing most rapidly at the moment. So you're in such a good position. Yeah. And for people on the call, if you need help with reinsurance broking in particular, please remember your friends at Willis Re InsurTech. So Rashad, what's the best way for InsurTech founders to ask their angels or early stage VCs for help? And in your experience, what would be an appropriate way to ask for help?
Sure. Being a founder is hard, right? A lot of the time you're trying to create a product or service that doesn't exist. You're trying to essentially change the status quo, and that's not easy, right? The typical companies I invest with, I'm pretty close with all the founders, right? Know them at a personal level, right? All the trials and tribulation. Yeah. So the investment I make, the companies I get involved with, it's just not it's not only the capital, it's also like my network, right? And the expertise that comes along with it. I mean, I'm your biggest cheerleader and advocate, because ultimately your success is my success. Absolutely. But there are some founders though. I think sometimes maybe they don't have enough work experience or things like that. I mean, I've had founders that I have didn't get a warm intro, like ask me for introduction. Reality of the matter is, as an investor and professional, like my network is my worth. So unless I know you at some level, I'm not going to kind of make an introduction to people that I know, right? Because it's just not appropriate. I mean, I've had weird things happen where, very young founders have asked me for data introduction. So I think second part of your question was, was inappropriate. I probably put that in the
right
as well.
That's a great example. That's a really great example. So what I'm hearing is that, it's really about building that personal relationship with you first, and then it's a very sort of easy way to communicate with you and sort of leverage your network as well. But you've got to forge that bond to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that right?
I think that's the only way to also understand that the introduction I'm going to make is going to be fruitful. Like for a data platform, we've had a couple conversation, and I made multiple introduction for that founder. I mean, he's going to be successful regardless. Second-time founder, first exit was 150 million. But I made an introduction for him to few people in my network, and one of them is to a data boutique, which is going to lead into a partnership agreement. At early stages, that's very critical, right? But it was a process for us to kind of get there, right? It wasn't like, first conversation is asking me for help, right? So I think you got to build that rapport and relationship with the guys.
That's great. And we've got 3 minutes left, Jen. So I'm going to sort of ask an umbrella question to each of you in order, and I'll start with you, Adam. And it's really, what's the one thing that you would want to leave a prospective recipient of investment capital with, in terms of your advice, your experience, what you've seen work, what you've seen not work? If you could offer one piece of sage advice, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Adam.
Yeah, so to the extent that they're interested in working with an incumbent broker or carrier, engagement is key. Engagement's everything. ROI, the technology, the product, the roadmap, the vision, the team, all that's important. But if you want to find success within a broker or carrier, you need to figure out engagement within multiple groups, multiple parties across the board. And so, sometimes it's gamification, sometimes that's incentivizing different groups, sometimes it's finding champions and really pushing them to help you navigate these massive ecosystems that are large incumbent insurance players. But to me, it's engagement. And honestly, the same applies for incumbent on the call today. If you work with a carrier broker, engagement, figure out ways to get involved. Do not, I know a ton of folks, smart, sophisticated folks on the innovation side of brokers and carriers. Don't let these projects and ideas stay there. Let them grow within larger portions of the business. And I think we'll all wake up 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now with some pretty good, successful innovation stories.
That's a great note. Yeah. And same to you, Brian. What's your sage advice for people on the call?
So I guess one thing, so I really like when founders ask for my advice, whether we're going to move forward or not. And I'd say I would encourage all founders to ask investors for advice. What do you think about this? This is how I'm thinking about it. Would you think about it the same way? It does happen, but it doesn't happen nearly as much as I'd like. And I think to Rashad's point, I think we're all rooting for all these companies to be successful, and we want to be helpful. So I'd say don't be shy about kind of asking for advice. And I kind of going back to my earlier point, acknowledging where you might be unsure about where you're going to go. I'd say, keep that in mind when you're talking to investors, as they do want to help no matter what.
So I'm getting from everybody this very human, tactile type experience, which I think echoes my own experience as well. And then finally, Rashad, we heard a horror story from you just now, but what's your sort of parting advice for the people on the call as it relates to you as an investor?
Yeah, I think also understand timing, right? Timing is very important when you're raising capital. If you're a pre-seed company and you're looking to raise, Series A money, is going to be very hard to come by. So know, what stage you are in your startup life cycle and target the. I see a lot of founders targeting like Series A, funds. They don't really play in the seed stage, right? So you're talking to the wrong people, right? So timing, as far as where you are in the company life cycle and evolution, and targeting the right people is very important. Also positioning yourself, to have a successful raise. There are like minimal things that you could do, kind of take off, to make yourself a viable investment for investors. And I think I see a lot of founders, very like they don't really look at it that way, and they have a hard time, which is not surprising. So if you're early stage founders, want to reach out, like what are the things that early stage investors look for? Definitely reach out. Happy to help you and advise you. What are the minimum things you should have successful?
What a wonderful offer, and I recommend everybody take you up on that. So, Tony, you asked me to have this delivered by 12:35 CST. It's now 12:36 CST, so I hope I did okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Andrew. And we didn't get to all the Q&A questions there, but don't worry. You have time to ask some of these guys here on the panel when you get to the networking table. So thank you, Andrew, Adam, Brian, and Rashad.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting a very engaging conversation.
Great
job.
answers, gentlemen.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Now that we had that very engaging aspect to it, when I think about fireside chats, I sitting back, relaxing, and learning something new. And that's what we're gonna do right now. And let me introduce Sina. He's a co-founder and CEO of Naya, a health benefits experience and management platform. He's also an entrepreneur in resident and mentor at Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator, and formerly the director of enterprise sales and partnerships at Enigma and Demst. And if you don't know, you should know David. He's a co-founder of InsurTech New York, working to build New York City as a global hub for InsurTech activity. He previously served as an innovation director at SVIA and led product for Zero, a loss control InsurTech acquired by Everest. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Roy. Well, it's great to be joined by you, Sina, today. I know that it's been an exciting whirlwind for you, and having some of your investors here must be an interesting thing. So I wanted to jump right into it because I know we don't have a ton of time for our chat today. So you raised your Series A during COVID, and one of the things that a lot of people ask is how long does the process take? So for you, how long did the process take from start to finish?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the awesome summit this afternoon. It's great to be a part of it, and looking forward to sharing more of our experiences that we've had at Naya. For us, it's obviously been a busy venture market really since the middle of last year. We raised our Series A at this point about 8 months ago, and from a timelines perspective, it really is the work that you do up front, developing the relationships with those investors, talking to them about the different challenges that the business is going through, the different opportunities, and of course the different wins. And so when you're able to make it some of an embedded, I know that's a used word a lot in insurance these days, but in a different way, embedded part of how you as a founder build your business, then when it comes time to raise, you can actually have open conversations up front with folks where you've already developed that relationship, and it leads to a completely different style of fundraise, especially, David, in a remote environment where investors have been investing in a different way than perhaps prior. Entrepreneurs have been raising in a different way, and that information asymmetry goes both directions. And so developing that sort of long-term strategy was helpful to us in basically raising our A in open to close about 6 weeks. And so there are so many different ways to sort of skin the cat, but that was our experience. And I think really building those relationships over the medium term is the most important part.
Well, I think that's a good cue for everyone for our networking coming up soon as an opportunity to start building your relationships with investors. So one of the questions that actually came in during the last panel was about what would be a legitimate annual recurring revenue to be considered venture backable. But I think let's adapt that for you, Sina, in terms of Series A. What do you think is the appropriate timing? And do you think that there's a certain revenue or run rate that you need to get to for investors to take you more seriously from a Series A perspective?
Sure, absolutely. And I won't sort of answer the question with that, hey, it really depends and it's all over the place. I'll do my best to give a direct answer as to not only our experiences, but a lot of my peers and co-founders around me. There are certainly safe places, right? And increasingly in today's market, if you're pushing through $1 million in ARR, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, even in talking to founders that are thinking about and raising their Series A more recently than us, that's a very sort of safe place to be. And of course, above that, you start to see at 1.5 and 2 and 2.5, premiums in terms of valuation. And you certainly see companies who are raising Series A's with less. It's so interesting. There are really two mindset of investors. Some folks refer to it as East Coast, West Coast. In my experience, it's really been less geographic, but you have those folks who really, even at the early stage, take a more financial view and want to understand those contracts and see those contracts expand. And then there are others who are really looking for what I refer to as that sucking sound, right? The real big pull from the market. And in the last panel, folks were talking about engagement, right? And in many cases and in many places, we're seeing companies raise their Series A, not necessarily on that revenue metric, but that loud sort of sucking sound you're seeing in the market in terms of adoption, engagement, utilization, and being able to then have actually even more data than those companies that have 1.2 million in ARR in terms of unit economics and user acquisition and beyond. And they can sort of take that information, that early data, and scale beyond it, talking through like the opportunity, the size of the TAM, et cetera. So while there's no necessarily one answer, there are, I think, really two camps in which you can go and approach different kinds of investors to raise that capital.
That's very helpful to see your perspective on that. So given that someone figures out when's the right time for them, the next logical question is, who should they talk to first? And not all investors will lead rounds. So from your experience, should the founders look for the lead investor first and then find everyone else? Or what happens if they get in a situation where they're talking with an investor, they're interested, but they can't lead?
Sure. So all of the above is always good and important. The reality is in today's environment, finding a lead investor is the most critical component. I think it always has been. It's just maybe more acute now. Finding co-investment or follow-on capital is an easier task due to the fact that there's a significant amount of capital pursuing these sort of venture-backed companies. So as you meet with folks and you develop that rapport, and let's say leading is not what they're interested in, but following on could be, two things really. One, you should definitely maintain that relationship and nurture it, because when you do find a lead investor, that's the difference in an extra 2 days to close your round instead of 2 weeks. The other thing that you should do is ask, do you know somebody who might be interested in leading? Right, and that's awesome for the co-investor, because if they make that and broker that introduction, the likelihood that they have a exciting allocation is conceivably higher. And then you have someone who already believes in your business, who's willing to make an introduction in a warm way, and even sort of represent that they'd be willing to put their capital where their mouth is too. So co-investors are fantastic, but really the game is all about finding that lead investor to set those terms, and it goes from uphill to downhill after that.
I really like the question about asking an investor that doesn't lead to make a recommendation, and that aligns perfectly from our last panel about what Brian was saying about he likes when people ask advice. So hopefully we can find some interesting threads as we go along. But final question for you, Sina, is you went through this process. Obviously, this is not going to be the last fundraising round that you do, but what parting advice do you have that you wish you knew before you started the process?
Sure. Really invest in asks from investors that have not put capital into your business, right? The reality is that investors you can learn really how they'll be once they're on your cap table before they're on your cap table. And so that can be introductions, commercial introductions, that can sort of be product and strategy sessions. Really don't be afraid to make those asks, because what you'll find, and we've since closed another round of capital as well, the reality of what the relationship is like before capital and after is often so similar. It's nearly identical. And so when you feel the resources of the firm on the front end, it makes it easier to make a decision when you have multiple term sheets. But then it's incredible to watch how identical the experience is even on the back end. Folks will open doors for you, run through walls alongside you and with you. Folks who are willing to talk to you at all hours of the night, but before they even make the investment. Guess what? It's true after, and we haven't necessarily had as much experience, but certain firms that are a little bit more transactional, and there are many that are entering the space vis-a-vis maybe even 1 or 2 years ago. You hear stories and you expect, and you sort of learn about different experiences. And so I know there are only so many hours in the day, and it's hard to build product and ship product and also spend time with investors, but it's really who you bring into your cap table that's alongside the team you hire from a strategic perspective. It's so critical that there's so many opportunities to learn what that relationship is going to be like before committing to it, and it's been really good to us in so many ways.
Thank you. So we're just about out of time, so really appreciate you joining us today, Sina. So from here, we're going to jump into a brief advertisement for InsurTech New York, and then everyone will have the opportunity to now hear the corporate VC side of the fence and hear their perspective. So for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, InsurTech New York, I will share a little bit more about our innovation program for carriers and brokers. Throughout the year, we have 4 programs designed to help carriers and brokers learn about the trends and get access to the best startups worldwide. Through our accelerator, you can get matched to the right InsurTechs just for you. Through our executive briefings, you can learn about industry trends and have peer networking sessions in our private events. With our early stage competition, you can see what's next from around the world. And you'll also be able to join us in more public events like this. So if you are interested in learning more, then please reach out to me or Tony to find out more about our membership. So I will pass it to Roy, who will be introducing our next panel, and then we will jump into our next panel.
Thanks, David. Before we do that, I want to say on behalf of New York, InsurTech New York, we're trying to be that hub for all the innovation programs. So thank you for that. But we have 2 more exciting panels. But at 3 p.m. Eastern, we're going to open it up to the networking, and you'll be able to talk with different investors, open and freely with everyone else here on the remote tool. But let me show and share with you how it works. Right here on your screen, you see that after speaking is done, you'll be placed at one of these tables, somewhat randomly on the floor at first. It's kind of disorienting, but just double click on the table where you want to be and it'll get you there. It's like Fortnite or Call of Duty if you guys are familiar with that. Second, let me share what's here on the map. You want to update your profile, which is in the top right corner. This way people can know who you are, and that's pretty important. You can do that now, actually, while we're in speaker mode. Now, on the map itself, the open networking area has lounges 1 to 6 of these tables. These are open up and you click on them, and that's where you can network. Next, there's an Ask Investors Anything section with the names of different companies. Here, this is where investors from respective companies will be, and you can join them to ask them questions. If it gets too busy, you can move from one table to another, or even to the one-on-one tables to have a private conversation. On the first floor, there are reserved specifically for some of those companies. Another note, there are 3 floors. You see to the left there, there's buttons there. There's kind of like an elevator. You can move from floor to floor and see what's out there. And just for adequacy and respect, we ask that you keep your cameras open and your mic open if you want to network. And if you just want to chill for a bit, there's a 3rd floor where you can camp out. Don't camp out on the 1st, 2nd floor. You have guys like me saying, hey, click on you. Is everything okay? Is everything working? So it's best to camp out there, give everyone an opportunity to speak. Some other tips, you might move from one table to another table by double clicking real quick. Once you're there, the audio and video pops open and you can have a conversation. Now, for the tech aspect of things, your browser does matter. Chrome is usually best. And then it's better to do that not on your VPN with your PC or Mac. When something is not working, just press refresh or restart. Now, the important thing is that the networking area is only accessible during the networking breaks. So during the presentation, the panel discussion you'll be at will be pulling together. Okay? So that's my public service announcement. Now I want to go over to raising money from corporate VCs, right? So as we go through this, let me introduce first Adam. He's a VP of Corporate Development at CNO, evaluating growth opportunities and leading project execution at the company. He formerly served as the Director of Investor Relations at FPA and at CNO, and was a Corporate Strategy Manager at CMA Group prior to joining CNO. We also have Will. He's the head of PNC Ventures at SCORE. He established SCORE's innovation team and served as the head of EMA. Specifically, and at Lloyd's, who was the innovation leader at SCORE's Channel Syndicate. His background is in reinsurance underwriting and serves as an advisor and angel investor. He also founded the Tech Nation UK InsurTech board. We also have David. He's a principal at Avanta Ventures, where he invests in mobile startups. Prior to joining Avanta, David was an investor at Longitude Capital, focusing on growth stage VC investments. It's a product orientation specialist at Pivotal Software and an investment banker at Lazard. Eric, who's is also the chairman and CEO of Traverse Insurance Group and was operating partner with Virgo Investment Group. He has about 30 years of senior operating and underwriting experience, including roles at Munich Re and as a regional president for AIG in the Americas. I'm going to pass it over to you, David, for this one.
All right, thanks, Roy. Well, really glad to be joined by our set of corporate venture investors today. And as Tony had mentioned, we really have the cream of the crop represented today. There are a lot of insurance companies that have made investments, but very few that have made successful investments and have had the strength to push through and make enough investments to even continue on and expand their funds. So we're going to get started with more of an international look. And I know, Will, you're joining us from the UK, so appreciate it being so late in the day for you. But I wanted to see from your perspective how SCORE looks at investments in North America differently than in Europe. So if you got an outreach by a top tier VC that was leading a funding round and said, hey, will SCORE participate? How would you view that differently than if you got an outreach from a smaller, lesser known VC in Europe?
Sure. Well, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Super interesting question. I think for us, SCORE PNC Ventures actually has a global remit. So we're balancing an opportunity set that sits across North America, Europe, and APAC and LATAM. And for us, I think there's probably two challenges in there. Firstly, we have this need to find great partners to invest in, and then great partners to invest with. And then we really have to adjust to whatever the local themes of an investment market or a startup market are. And even just to say kind of North America versus Europe is probably a bit reductive, because there's a big difference between the ecosystem in the Valley compared to the ecosystem in New York, compared to the ecosystem in Ohio, and so on. And then I think the second thing that's quite market specific is those things that can affect a company's value or their growth trajectory. And there, it's things like how far can a company reach selling their product or their products inside their home market before they have to go into new markets to open up? Is the talent pool there? How much access to capital do they have? And again, that difference is really market to market. It's not just a difference between North America and Europe. And so I think what we're really looking in every single case is just the fundamentals of the company and the product market opportunity. There might be product market fit already, or there might simply be the test of, do we believe that product market fit can be achieved? But those are the things that are market specific. It's not so much a pure difference between, we treat one company differently because they're based in London versus New York. And then I think your second question is a really interesting one, because this has changed a lot over, I think, the last 7 to 10 years. And I think that that kind of difference that you imply between US VC and European VC has really normalized a lot. The ecosystem in Europe is a lot more mature now. I think the venture kind of firms in the US are a lot more active in Europe as well. And so what I'd say is different firms, as the panelists earlier touched on, bring different things to the equation. So if there's a brand of VC that can bring access to better hiring or something like this, then of course it makes a round dynamic different. But again, from our point of view, the fundamentals are all about the company. So we wouldn't just ignore the fundamentals and our belief in the company just because a certain other type of VC gets involved.
I think that's really fair to acknowledge the regional differences in making those decisions and really weighing what value adds can be brought to the table. So I want to shift for a moment to Eric, because I know that in this panel today, you guys have more the newest corporate VC group, and I know that you're going to be doing a formal announcement of it soon. So when you started out, you had done many of the investments off the balance sheet. How do you make the appropriate risk tolerances for those investments to ensure that it doesn't negatively affect your overall investment strategy? And when do you decide to make that transition to be a full CVC set off from the rest of the company?
Well, nice to see everybody, and thank you, David. I think those are really two, as Will said, interesting questions. We have a little bit of a technical piece. We don't really regard ourselves, you'll see in the announcement, as a pure CVC, where we really do believe the way we've structured Transverse Ventures is to be independent, but it's affiliated with the insurance group, right? So there is no need for them to, for example, dividend money back or show an investment profitability on its own right to the insurance company. Where the strength comes from Transverse in that regard is the prowess around insurance. For example, within the company of the Transverse Insurance Group, we have 500 years of management experience. So going back to the first question, one of the things that when we first started this, the premise, what we wanted to do was whatever we do, we wanted to hit it out of the park, right? For our first fund, we were going to keep it relatively small, and the types of investments that we would do, we wanted to be able to bring the power of the insurance expertise to them and help them in whatever way that would be. So that, if you think about from the, I'm going to borrow a little bit from what Will said, there's fundamentals, and we all look at fundamentals, right? The management team, the length of time, what their idea is, the business plan, hold water, is the, does the business model from an Excel standpoint, a spreadsheet hold appropriate water as well, and can they actually actualize what that plan is, right? Can they move it into the market? Do they have the product expertise? And more importantly, do they have the affiliated ecosystem potentially capabilities? With that as an overlay, we then say, how can Transverse help, right, from the insurance side into that entity? And that would really start to drive some of our investment decisions, right? So the investment decisions that we made during this period, right from the balance sheet, we believe we were able to add expertise. And I'll draw on one in particular as an example, and then come back to the second question, or part B of that question. There's an entity called Foresight. And from the very start of that process, one of the things when they came and we were talking to them, there are other investors who are going to come in if they ended up having paper. So we were able to provide the paper. Their initial business plan, and I'm just going to share very top highlights, was probably about 6 states. Through our expertise, we were able to bring them into 15 states. They've gone from pre-money, let's say 10, to a post-money of near 140 this coming year. And we believe that allowance of what we did on top of the fundamentals of what they were doing, and they also had a product from a workers' compensation perspective that was fundamentally different than just, hey, I'm a workers' comp and I've done something new, right? You know, that end of it as well. So those are some of the things that we would look at that begin to mitigate the risk side of it and actually enhanced our tolerance for whatever that might be. And then we, very lastly, we would look at some type of diversity in the investment from the portfolio perspective as well, which is what we've done. Part B is, I think what you're asking, Dave, was is how are the returns to be?
Yeah, so really the part B of the question was, which you answered in the beginning, is how do you segment off as you've shifted from purely balance sheet to now including other LPs that will be part of it? So,
okay, I'll answer that just a little bit more fully, and I'll try to do it very succinctly. Is what we've done is we actually then taken and put it into the portfolio at cost, and it's now part of Transverse Ventures, not part of the balance sheet, not connected, but it's now part of Transverse Ventures. And then that whoever has come in from the portfolio perspective gets that variable, you know, that upside, if they will, right? Because those are already coming in at cost. There's been some time to monetize what those investments could have been or have been doing, and now they're part of the Transverse Venture. Transverse Insurance Group is separate. Sometimes they might not even be called on, or a person might be called on to let's say, do actuarial analysis or some other type of analysis that when we might be looking at a particular investment.
Thanks, Eric. So I know you mentioned Foresight and I guess their sister company, SafeSight, which I know has a home on the West Coast near David. So appropriate transition to David talking about Silicon Valley. So from your vantage point in Silicon Valley, there's a good deal of emerging technologies that maybe even some of the people here are not super familiar with, like the autonomous vehicle technologies, edge computing, and blockchain. So when you're looking at technologies that are in Silicon Valley that are ahead of the curve, might be 2 years out until they have a tangible insurance application, how do you evaluate those? And would you even be willing to make a bet if they haven't been able to yet articulate their insurance application today?
Yeah. First of all, thanks, David. It's great to be here with everyone today. The short answer is yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the key roles that we play at Avanta is the ability to help CSA anticipate disruption coming down the pipeline. And many of the technologies you talked about, David, are what we kind of think of as Horizon 3, right? Which may not have a direct application or a partnership today, but absolutely an area that we focus on, right? So take the space around autonomy, for example. One of the areas that we've actually spent a lot of time thinking around is about the second order impacts of autonomy or vehicle connectivity or any number of similar disruptions that this industry is facing. And one of the interesting things there is actually around payments, for example, in terms of as you have AVs driving around, how do they pay for services, whether that's parking, tolling, charging, or even insurance? Because the way our entire payment infrastructure is architected today in terms of authentication and security, it's actually around verifying a human, right? Being present and authorizing those charges. And so a financial institution, whether a bank or an insurance company, actually needs to kind of rethink how they comply with a lot of the regulatory requirements. So, we actually invest in a company called CarIQ that's building an authentication technology that validates the vehicle itself rather than the driver. And it starts to have some really interesting implications around insurance too, particularly as the driver is removed from the vehicle and there's a shift to a more verified and potentially consumption-based model. But to get back to your question, we think it's vital to be looking at longer-term opportunities that have the potential to dramatically impact the insurance industry in 5 years, right? But may not have a direct commercial partnership line of sight today, because those are oftentimes the things that kind of reshape old value chains, if you will, and create kind of new control points where outsized value and returns can be captured.
David, and to the rest of my panel members, it's so spot on, right? We just had a talk at lunchtime today where we said, the insurance industry in about 4 to 5 years, I think will go through a fundamental shift of change, because there's a number of people who will retire, and there's a whole second generation that have been sort of underneath that portion of people coming in, that'll really drive that change, right? The use of it and the ubiquitousness of certain types of technology. Great point. Great point.
All right, well, appreciate it, David, and thanks for Eric filling in as I was getting some small technical issues fixed. But really, the next area I wanted to move on to, which both Will and Eric spent some time on, was about establishing a strategic fit. And I know oftentimes the entire purpose of a CVC is to find a strategic fit, but a strategic fit is really sometimes a nebulous term. So I really wanted to give Adam a chance, and hopefully not just to speak for himself, but also to speak for other CVCs that are in the life and annuities business. How do you define a strategic fit? And maybe you could help us absolve a myth that sometimes investors that are looking for a strategic fit are willing to step back from financial returns. Is that true, or is that not the case?
So first, thanks for having me. To answer the first question around strategic fit, for us at CNO, and I suspect for others in the life and health space, it's pretty easy. And it's how can you assist us in our current or potentially our future go-to-market? It's really only our investment criteria is we're only going to invest in companies that can help us out today or where we're going in the future. And so it's a pretty easy identification for who those companies are. In regards to the second question around strategic fit versus financial returns, given the fact that my boss he wears two hats, he's our head of corporate development and also our chief investment officer, I will say no. He will not give on the financial return aspect just because it's a strategic fit. But I think digging deeper into that, I don't think you have to. I think they're synergistic. And the reason for that is because any company that we find that's going to be a strategic fit, that's going to help us out, that's going to be able to plug into our value chain, is likely offering a very good product or service that if we find it beneficial, somebody else is going to find it beneficial as well. Now you got all the ingredients for a successful company. You've got a good product or service, you have customers, so that financial return will come. So again, I don't think you have to make that choice. They work in concert together.
What a beautiful thing, not having to make that choice. Go ahead, Will.
Right, I was going to say, I completely agree with Adam. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot kind of in our group is the concept of kind of a strategic gap emerging. And our thinking is that when CVC kind of goes wrong, in inverted commas, it's because the CVC group starts to lose sight of what the strategic priorities of the core business are. And so for us, if you like, the way we handle that is by having our investment thesis, which is set around the investment activities of the ventures group, but all of the kind of cyclical inputs into that investment thesis are driven by the corporate strategy as our North Star. So we're acutely conscious to make sure that that gap is kind of minimized year on year as the core company changes, because it won't be the same as when you first spin up a CVC group 3 or 4 years ago today.
Yeah, so digging a little bit deeper on some of these type of strategic relationships. I know, Eric, you mentioned earlier about Foresight that one of the unique things that you were able to offer is we can offer paper and the other investors cannot. So the question is both for you, Eric, and then for Will from a reinsurance perspective. When you vet the digital MGAs or InsurTechs in general, are you looking at, hey, how can we help them first from a commercial relationship, whether it's a fronting relationship or a reinsurance relationship, or are you looking from the investment perspective first?
It's a great question. Will, you want me to go first? Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the things that we look at where it's been independent, so I'll just name real quickly. In our portfolio, we've got a parametric, we've got a life play, we've got a workers' comp play, and there's some P&C stuff. And so there are things that we look at to that point, David, I think, is that we will certainly look at it as an investment, but that investment is where can we add value to that investment, because we're not necessarily going to stay with it all the way to, let's say, a Series D, right? You know, and that end of it, you know, we'll probably, it'll move from us at a certain point. So there's an element there where certainly the investment lies in. Ideally, and in many cases it is a fact, we would like it to be over where the Transverse Insurance Group has some affinity or capability to provide to as well. And so the commercial aspect, I think, is one of the areas that we can bring to bear, where we have fantastic relationships with the reinsurance community. We certainly have great relationships with the brokerage community, right? So we're, $500 million plus in, premiums type of a company at this point and growing from there. And, so it really is, there's an element there that through those relationships, we hopefully should be able to turn that on to the investments that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, I mean, on our side, I think the point Eric made about needing to bring more than just capital. Capital is so fungible these days is the crucial one. And so for us, although we're kind of investing out of a dedicated vehicle, we're fully embedded in schools, P&C Partners business team, which brings all of the, let's say, the value-added services to insurance and reinsurance clients. And if you think about the two types of companies we invest in, really this conversation is actually driving when we prefer to invest. So for MGAs, carriers, distributors, we're often investing pretty early at seed and A, because both in the team and then directly with the colleagues we sit down and work with every day, we have a huge amount of experience in pretty much every property and casualty line of business that we can bring to bear to support the development of that company, whether there's a commercial relationship or not. So the commercial relationship would need to stand on its own 2 feet, and the investment would need to stand on its own 2 feet. But regardless of that, we can help the company on both sides, whether the two limbs of that relationship stand up or whether we're all hopping, if I can drag this analogy probably further than I should go. And then on the other side, where it's software solutions, risk platforms, things like this, here what I think is interesting for InsurTech working with us is the relationships we have with 5,000 or so insurers globally, most of which have been very long-standing. And for us, what's important is bringing solutions which have proven immediate value to our clients. And on that basis, we tend to invest a little bit later, so it's Series A and Series B, because we want to make sure that we can deliver for the InsurTech if we're going to try and help them scale that solution or help them understand how to make it more scalable with inputs from us or from our clients. And equally, we want to make sure that schools core clients are getting value out of the relationships that we bring them.
Appreciate your thoughts and really going into more of the details of what is important in those relationships and what you can add. I mean, I think, Will, it's pretty amazing to say we can introduce to thousands of carriers. There's not that many other organizations that have that scale and scope. So looking from the outside perspective of it, there are things that you're directly aligned with, but there can also be things that you're tangentially aligned with. And I know, David, one of Avanto's target areas is adjacencies in insurance, whether it's embedded plays or alternative forms of distribution, or companies like some of the ones that had won our competition, like Matterport, where insurance might not be the first industry. So could you share some examples of some adjacencies that you've looked at or potentially part of your portfolio? And what are some of the justifications why InsurTech investors should look beyond strictly InsurTech companies?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty interesting, right? Because the definition of what an InsurTech is has very much blurred, right? In the same way that the definition of what a broader fintech is has. For example, take a company, whose core product is enterprise workflow software, but their entire business model is predicated on monetizing transactions or selling insurance policies. Is that an enterprise software business or a fintech or InsurTech, right? So I think the lines really are blurring, number one. And so as we kind of look at adjacent opportunity areas to insurance, we start to think about the insurance value chain itself. And particularly what we're seeing is a number of really interesting opportunities around the distribution side. So for example, we made an investment into a company called LoanSnap, which is a prop tech business focused on mortgage origination. They're not only able to provide customers kind of a fully digital mortgage experience, which allows them to cut closing times in half, oftentimes more than that, but they also leverage machine learning to create personalized recommendations to help consumers optimally consolidate their debts to create the lowest monthly payments. Now, on the surface, LoanSnap isn't an InsurTech, right? But when you start to think about it, there's an incredible alignment with home insurance, because you need home insurance to get a mortgage. So what better time to offer consumers a great home insurance option than when they're not only thinking about it, but have an urgent need, right, in order to close their mortgage. And it actually creates a great win-win scenario because you're providing the consumer a holistic offering where you can optimize kind of the entire customer journey. So we've been working very closely with the LoanSnap team and internally with our home insurance business to explore kind of those partnership opportunities. So, you know, again, I'd say that the definitional line of what an InsurTech is blurring, and that that kind of in turn leads to some really interesting opportunity areas from an investment perspective across multiple sectors and areas, right? Which can have a direct impact on how insurers kind of think about distribution, risk, underwriting, et cetera.
Totally agree that the lines are blurring, and if anything, they're a lot blurrier now than I think they were 2 or 3 years ago, and especially with a lot of the embedded insurance plays. So for the remaining section, I want to go into some more difficult questions, really focusing in on handling some of the potential conflicts that come up in your portfolio. So Eric, I'll give you the first chance on some of the tougher questions, but does Transverse set a policy or limitation on investing in startups in the same line of business or with the same value proposition? For example, would you invest in 2 workers' compensation focused MGAs if they're doing business in the same states?
Well, I'll have to divide that into 2 parts, because the first part, we certainly would invest in an MGA or make an investment in an entity that may have the same premise or same element, right? You know, obviously you're looking to see some kind of differentiation, but they may be 2 very applicable types of technology, underwriting kinds of prowess, new ways of looking at the back end, if it's claims, processing, payments, whatever it may be. And especially on the the claim side, and how the advancement from the workers' comp claims analytics and the use of AI and other to that as well. Actually, deep learning is actually something we're quite interested in and understanding more so as it applies to claims. So if you think about the next step of that question, though, it's it depends on the paper. So you'd have to have at least 2 different papers, right? Because the filings would begin to prohibit you from a state perspective, and we will not put ultimately what would be a client from a paper standpoint, if we were to put from the paper, into competition against each other in that regard. So to answer the second part, we would not invest. We would look to, if there are 2 that had that and were able to, they take these 10 states and you take these 15 or 20 states and you begin to move in that direction, that would be okay. But having them overlap and be in the same state, we would probably not do that.
Well, I think that's an important clarification, especially going into that relationship, really knowing what's the scale and scope and ambition of the entrepreneurs. But building on that, so as portfolio companies grow, they oftentimes come into situations where they may compete with each other because they're doing something different than when they otherwise started. So this is for first Will and then David. How would you handle a situation where your portfolio company grew to the point where it's now a competitor with one of your other portfolio companies?
Well, I think there's a couple of important framing pieces. So firstly, the insurance and the reinsurance market is one where almost by default, the network and the web of people working together is almost totally interlinked. There probably, I'm exaggerating slightly, but there probably isn't a reinsurance client that SCOR has who has not in some way, for instance, transacted with Munich Re, with Swiss Re, and so on in recent years. So the industry is set up by default to deal with conflicts, whether that be through filings or whatever. So from a capacity point of view, I think the rules of engagement are really well understood. And often it can be just a case of needing to take the time to explain how that can work if 2 companies converge. I think from an investment point of view, insurance is not really, in my eyes, a zero-sum game. I think there can be category leaders, but I'm not sure I believe in the kind of, the single category winner where you run into the same issue of portfolio cannibalization that you do in, I don't know, ride sharing. I just don't think that applies so much to home insurance. So I think if you invest in, let's say, a company which is writing home insurance, multi-state, and then they add auto, and then you invested in an auto company which is out of home and they converge, I think so long as the bounds of confidentiality and the importance of good faith partnerships are respected, really it should not be kind of a dramatic issue as where you find yourself simultaneously an investor in Lyft and Uber. But that being said, there are definitely some narrower markets where I think different rules of engagement would apply. A weird example from my specialty lines underwriting past would be aquaculture, where there's only really 4 or 5 players. So if you're going to back one, that's probably the only one that you should find yourself backing. So long-winded way of saying, the important thing, and it just seems to be the answer I'm giving for every question, is context, and being open and transparent in terms of how you got into that position in the first place.
Yeah, just to kind of build on what Will already said. Similarly, we don't invest in directly competing businesses, right? And we don't think it's the right thing to do. In fact, we kind of go out of our way to make sure that our businesses aren't competitive with each other. So, for example, if we're looking at a new investment that could tangentially cross into one of our portfolio's market opportunity areas, before making that investment into the new company, we'll actually reach out to our portfolio to get their feedback, right, on it, in terms of if they think there's potentially going to be a competitive dynamic there. Now, what we've found is that when it comes to those things, there's kind of 2 things that come up. One, there's a lot of noise out in the market, and when you kind of dig in and get to the brass tacks of what companies are building, oftentimes, while on the surface they're similar, it's actually quite different, whether from a use case, functionality, or technology perspective. And that kind of leads into the second point, which is that more often than not, what we find is that there are actually some really interesting partnership opportunities between various businesses. In that, oftentimes we'll hear from our existing portfolio company, wow, we didn't realize that this company existed, and they could actually make a great partner to actually augment our solution and what we're building. So, we take a pretty strong position that we won't invest in directly competitive businesses, but oftentimes you kind of find that when you dig in, they may not actually be directly competing with one another.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. I think a lot of times understanding what InsurTech does and seeing what's on their website is a really big difference, and appreciate your approach of looking at partnership. So we looked at the concept of conflicts interportfolio, but haven't yet looked at the concept of conflicts across the value chain. So Adam, and you guys focus in the personal lines life business, there's often a concern that brokers will be disintermediated, and I know that you guys have some captive agents. So how do you believe that is the best way to handle if you bring on a direct-to-consumer life company you invest in, like maybe Jenny Life, and some of your agents that are already distributing your product? How do you communicate overall to the value chain? Here's the distinctions and here's the rules of engagement.
Yeah, it actually gets even a little bit deeper than that, because we do have, as you said, we have got a healthy captive channel where we distribute through, but we also have our own direct-to-consumer channel. Many of you will recognize this, Colonial Penn. They do some human lists, and they do telesales, and so we do have some portfolio companies that may or may not be considered competitors there. But I would say no, we don't. That would not limit our investment because we put the consumer at the center of it all. And so that's driven from the top. Our CEO talks about it all the time. We want to allow the consumer to make the choice on how they want to interact with us. And so if they want to choose to go through a digital human list channel, great, let's let them do that. If they want to call us up, great, let's let them do that. If they want to chat with us, great, let's let them do that. If they want to have someone in their house to talk to them about it, buying an insurance product, great, let's let them do that. So putting that consumer at the center really drives all the strategy around that. Now, I think that there's other things around insurance that makes this a workable and viable strategy, and that's just because insurance is complicated. And so people are going to come in at different altitudes as well. And so there always is going to be, it's my personal thesis and our company's thesis, that there's always going to need to be an agent to be able to speak to. And some people may want to have that agent into their house to sell an annuity product, to learn more about an annuity product or a whole life product. Why? Because they're inherently more complicated. A term life product, digitally distributed, yeah, totally can do that. And maybe somebody who's educated about those more complicated products would feel comfortable purchasing that in a humanless interaction, but oftentimes they're not. And so let's let the consumer drive where we go with all of this.
Elegantly put, putting the consumer first. So a final question, which I'll give everyone a chance to go through. So I guess we'll probably go Will, Eric, David, and then let Adam close. But if you had one piece of advice that you could give the founders listening today that are looking to raise money from a corporate VC, what would you share?
I'm going to cheat slightly because I heard Brian earlier talk about the importance of asking for advice. I think that's a killer one. And the reason is that one of the key things I think you have when you talk to CVCs is an opportunity to talk to a venture unit, which has a much deeper view of companies in a particular sector. We see the whole cake, if you like, instead of just a slice. And so I think that gives you a unique kind of ask about how to solve some of the early problems that you inevitably have when you're spinning up whatever type of InsurTech you are, an MGA, a distribution business, a software business, and so on. And that leads you straight into the key conversation, which we've kind of all talked about, which is what upside you as a founder are looking for beyond capital, and how to see the proof points that firm can deliver, especially if you're looking for the insurance expertise or the client relationships on the two sides of the InsurTech world.
I can jump in here, David. Oh,
go ahead,
Eric.
Oh, please, Dave.
So absolutely agree with you, Will. And to kind of build on top of that, I would say engage early, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, so that you can understand the particular group you're engaging with, because while we have a lot in common, each CVC is slightly different from the other, right? In terms of the areas that we focus on, investing, care about. So I find that founders sometimes generalize, right, and say, oh, we're not an InsurTech, so it doesn't really make sense for us. But again, getting back to what we discussed earlier, that line is blurring, and we absolutely will invest in opportunities that may not be a traditional InsurTech. And secondly, and there's a really important point here around customer needs that we'll kind of hit on as well. But I think a lot of times, people say that engaging with corporates can be distracting, but I actually take the opposite view here, particularly if you're serving insurance customers or looking to address insurance pain points. Engaging with CVCs who have the direct feedback from the internal business units can oftentimes help you understand either needs of your core customer or even some of the potential future roadblocks that you could run into and how to avoid them. And all of that can in turn kind of inform and help you build a better product, solution, and company at the end of the day. So engage early would be my piece of advice.
Mine is preparation, right? So take your time, understand, just as to Will's, Adam's, David's points, across the board, there's capital available. There's money out there, right? But I don't think you just need money, right? You should get smart money. And so be prepared of who you are. Make sure you're, if it's a document, a PowerPoint, your presentation, your discussion points, you really know what you're talking about. Right? And make sure you check back through into the market, the segments, your competitors, et cetera, and why you're different. And when you're prepared, go to the right people. Don't do a scattergun. Don't go out to 200 of these. You may have to ultimately, but really try to pick the 10 that you really want to have that money to invest in you, because I think a number of us have said there's help and advice that would come with that. Right? So with that, get smart money. Prepare and get smart money.
All right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, oftentimes this can be a little bit of a dating game, and finding the right partner really matters. And sometimes that comes down to culture. Sometimes that comes down to fit. So really figuring that out early on is helpful. And I think, Will had hit on it a little bit. Understand the VC's investment criteria, why they're there, what are they doing? What are those most important pieces, those most important pillars? Because that will identify who if you're disqualified from working with that person or not. Or do they have the right, or do the same thoughts and thesis around companies that you have? And so you can easily figure out who to continue on with and who you can cut out real early. Referrals. I think a referral is a great way to do that as well. Ask them who their other portfolio companies are. Can I speak with the founder, whoever you work with most over there? That'll give you a great read on whether that's going to work out. And again, if you're a fit to go to that next phase. And another one that may be a little bit different, and I don't see it too often, it's happening a little bit more, to find who that good partner may be. The banking channel really can help here, because I on a daily basis, weekly basis, I'm talking to Wall Street bankers. They understand what my needs are. They understand who I am culturally. They really get to know their clients really well. And I think that could be a very unique source to figure out who that next investor may be. It's just a conversation. I don't think it necessarily hurts, but they really, bankers really spend a lot of time understanding who their constituents are, and they really can potentially bring some good advice and guidance.
Thanks, Adam. So there you have it. 4 lessons from 4 terrific CVCs on how to engage. Ask for advice, engage early, prepare, and find the right fit. So thanks everyone for joining, and I will invite Roy back to bring up our next and final panel.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Oh, well done, well done.
Roy, make sure you turn on your audio.
Oh, sorry about that. That was a great panel. I was saying thanks, everyone. That was great to hear that great advice. Out of that, I got being married with kids to really get to dating and raising money with VCs. So I have a lot more notes to take from you, David, from what you've taken. Going over to our next panel, getting to the public markets with SPACs, IPOs, and acquisitions. Let me introduce you to this panel. First, we have, and you guys can come on here as I introduce you. Please open your videos and mics. Emily, she is the president of Allstate Identity, formerly InfoArmor. She joined the company in 2007 and held previous roles from Director of Business Systems and Sales, Senior VP of Sales and Marketing and Employee Protection Solutions, and COO. We also have Ben, is a principal at Munich Re Ventures from the Bay Area, which will chill. Ben is a board observer at High Definition Vehicle Insurance and Forge. He has served on venture teams of Samsung and JetBlue Technology Ventures. Ben also serves as InsurTech lead on their emerging VC association. My friend Kevin, I met at the last conference. He's the chairman and CEO of EDOC Acquisition Corp, a SPAC focused on business operating in healthcare sectors. He serves on the board of Infit Acquisition Corp, a SPAC focused on InsurTech space. He was formerly chief economist at Horizon Financial, and he's an adjunct professor at NYU. Cheers to that. Brett is a partner and co-head of the capital markets section of the corporate practice group at Locklord. He has extensive experience representing insurance companies and underwriters in public and private security offerings, demutualizations, and M&A. Eric, my buddy, is a strategic advisor at InsurTech New York and a partner at InsurTech New York Fund, where he also focuses on early stage startups. He was formerly the global head of corporate development at Forrester Financials and managing director at Argo Fund. I'm going to pass to you, Eric.
Thank you, guys. An amazing group of people. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation, different perspectives here. So let's start with Emily. Emily, take us back to 2016 before the Allstate acquisition. How did your team decide it was the right time for an exit?
So good question. Happy to share a little bit about our story. So we started the company in 2007, myself along with a couple other core founders. And really, as we started the business, our goal was to grow profitably, grow rapidly, and then find a suitor if it made sense. In 2016, at that point, we were doubling our revenue year over year. We had a business that was kicking off a lot of cash, and our competitive position in the marketplace was really strong. So you might think, well, why on earth would you think about selling the business when you're absolutely growing like crazy and there's still so much upside, which we've continued to see? Well, there's, as you all know, a lot more to a decision than just hard facts and money and dollars. We had some members of our management team that had pushed hard for almost 10 years and were really ready to see the fruits of their labor, move on, do other things, get a little bit antsy, if you will. And at the time of which we were acquired in 2018 by Allstate, we were still about 60% employee owned. So we had only taken one institutional funding round, an external. We were, kind of bootstrapped, friends and family, Series A, until we had one funding event in 2015. And so when you think about that, you have 60% of your business still owned by employees. And every employee in our company was a shareholder. So whether you were at the call center, sales team, middle management, senior leaders, there's a big group of people that had worked really hard to get us where we were. And by selling the business, we were able to reward over 100 employees who had sacrificed a lot to make our company succeed. So I'd say that was one of the best decisions, just as a quick aside, one of the best decisions we ever made when we started the business was making every single employee a shareholder. On the flip side, to those that were really ready to kind of move on and do something different, there were others of us on the management team that still saw a massive opportunity in the market and knew that given the right strategic synergy that we would be able to make even a bigger impact on the world. So we wanted to make sure we were in the right hands to do that, no pun intended, but both from a financial perspective and also a customer reach perspective. And so an acquisition, more specifically with a strategic partner, was the right outcome for our business, which now 2.5 years later, as a part of Allstate, it's really proven to be true.
It's interesting. Back in 2016, I think, first of all, the SPAC bubble did not exist just yet. It wasn't as liquid as it is today. And I think IPOs were just starting to come back to the market. How much of what was happening at a microeconomic environment, the IPO environment, the liquidity environment in the market had an influence in your decision-making, choosing to go into the acquisition route versus IPO, just a different way of going public?
We never spent a lot of time talking about going public. We just didn't. We knew that we would have better strength and better ultimate market opportunity with the right strategic buyer. And we also had specific people within the management team that didn't want to continue, which is a little bit unique, right? So we knew that that we wanted maximum valuation and that our potential, we had so much upside in the market. We continue to. And that we could really see that come through and come to fruition with the right strategic partner.
Got it. Brad, the next question is for you. Making a decision of going public or becoming part of an acquisition can be quite emotional. I think for a lot of founders and first-time founders, it's quite exciting to see a potential realization of their effort. However, it's quite complex and there's a lot of things involved. So can you share some key considerations that founders should weigh in when comparing between a traditional acquisition and the path of going public?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's, as we heard Emily just say, in the life of their company, they reached a point where they decided what was right for them was not an IPO, but to seek a different exit strategy. So when you're thinking about, an IPO or perhaps private equity or seeking growth capital, I'm assuming you're in a position where you're looking for capital, and that's what's driving this decision. So, it might be helpful just to sort of discuss a few of the pros and cons of the IPO route versus the sort of the PE growth capital route. The number one consideration for an IPO is generally raising capital. So, the cash proceeds that you get from the IPO are really the driving motivator for pursuing that. Once you're public, you've got the cash proceeds, you have an enhanced ability to attract and retain qualified employees and members to be on your board of directors. The enhancement of the company's stature is significant when you're public. You may be having quarterly earnings calls and a presence in the market that you wouldn't have as a private company. Certainly there's the opportunity for the enhancement of market value. Public companies tend to trade at a multiple that's not available to private companies. You can access the public markets for future financing, which can be a benefit, as well as having public company stock for acquisitions. So, and then of course, liquidity is another key factor if you're public. None of these things are guaranteed just because you're public, but if the company is successful oftentimes a traded market will develop, and the possibility to seek a subsequent exit and realize the public company premium on selling the business. So those are some of the pros of being public. On the other hand, being public subjects you to a significant amount of SEC compliance and regulation and accounting expense. You've got not only the cost of going public, but the cost of being public. So those are things that you sort of weigh. You've got increased exposure to securities litigation. We've seen a lot of that where, for whatever reason, a company's stock drops, and the next thing you know, you've got all these law firms you have or have not heard of reviewing breaches of fiduciary duties, et cetera. So most of those cases are meritless, but it's a distraction nonetheless. So those are some of the things that you weigh against. I guess I would also add, being public, your flexibility in how you run your company is under greater scrutiny. You're going to be disclosing material events. You're going to be disclosing compensation for your top managers. And you might even be filing copies of material, important customer contracts with the SEC. So you got to weigh those against the benefits of an IPO. On the other hand, if you're seeking growth capital or private equity sourcing, those transactions can typically be completed with less time and expense than an actual IPO. And you can also get a more targeted capital raise out of that, because if you only need a limited, say, $20, $30 million, that's not really enough money to raise to go public. You need to be, 100 million or more probably to do an effective IPO, and that in today's world, that would be a small IPO. So, and then of course, if you do that, if you go the growth capital route, all of a sudden you'll have a significant minority investor in your boardroom. And so that's, either way, you're probably looking at some loss of flexibility and control, whatever you do, whenever you raise capital. But those are some of the considerations, I would say, Eric.
So, Brett, just a follow-up question on that. Since you get to see a lot of transactions and you've seen probably hundreds of transactions in your career, what would you say is when you meet with founders and they come to you for advice on a potential IPO or a potential acquisition, what do you think is driving that decision? Is it the market liquidity that's driving the IPO decision, or is it truly the founders where they've seen, just like Emily, it is the right time to create liquidity for some of the members of the team?
Well, I guess I would say it's probably a combination of the two, because if the market's not right, it's going to be hard to complete your IPO unless you're unless you're trying to do a demutualization or some transaction that's not necessarily correlated with the overall stock market. So you have to sort of be the right time in the market, and the company needs to be in the right stage of its own development to actually pursue a public listing in terms of revenue, hopefully profitability, and those sort of factors.
Got it. Thanks, Brett. Ben, bringing a very unique perspective from a CVC angle, what is the CVC perspective in regards to portfolio company liquidity events, or perhaps potentially, in your case, Munich Re acquiring the portfolio company?
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks to Tony and David and the whole InsurTech New York crew. Happy to be here today. So, I mean, in terms of liquidity events for portfolio companies, my perspective is I love them. I think it's it's sort of the end goal here when you're making early stage investments, especially. And so I think that there's tons of things to consider, right? And it's not just the founders making a decision too. Typically, when you've reached that stage, you have a board, right? And it's and you're helping as a board member, guiding founders through that process. And so I think it's I think in terms of liquidity exits, it's a great thing for the founders, for the employees, for the investors sometimes as well, right? Depending on the number. So in terms of Munich Re, it's not really my job. We have a corporate development team. Munich Re has acquired our own portfolio companies. They've acquired other startups. They've made equity financings into companies as well. Our ventures team writes checks between $1 and $20 million. So, Munich Re is very forward thinking, and they want to be sort of on the cutting edge. They try to, like every. So, but I've been pretty impressed with that corp dev group and the vision that they bring.
So there is a Chinese wall between Munich Re corporate dev and the CVC arm. Is that correct?
Yeah. We just do very different things. I mean, if you're talking early stage equity financings, that's our ventures group. We're the only group in Munich. And as these companies scale, and we've seen lots of InsurTechs attract, 9 figures easily in terms of an investment round, and that a little, a different group, and we'll maybe help advise occasionally, but really that's a different group.
So in today's market environment, do you have a preference if your company goes public or it gets acquired by a strategic?
Both, can be great. I think to answer the question, I think, when I'm looking at a company, I'm trying to understand if this company can scale, hit escape velocity and go public, right? And be a multi-billion dollar company. But there's also excellent exits, right? I mean, in terms of acquisitions, I think the important thing is, if you're a founder, you want to get bought and not.
Yeah.
You want to be in a situation where there's an offer from some large company and you can't say no, right? And it's like, hey, I'm changing money for lots of people in our company and all of that. And so I think that's always a good situation. When exits do happen, for if the company's struggling too, right? There's acqui-hires and all sorts of different flavors. And so I think that it's it's important to, when we're talking about positive liquidity outcomes, it's getting bought rather than sold. So
sure.
Yeah.
It's just a follow up on that. So how do you guys handle situations where an investment is not performing? What is your exit strategy in that situation?
Depends. Sometimes companies will just, file Chapter 11. That happens. There's, I think on the type of business that it is. I think, listen, when it comes to InsurTech, companies that have raised a significant amount of capital have built up books of business. There'll be other P&C carriers or whatever line of business it is. There'll be interest in just that book of business, acquiring that, right, and those customers. And so I think that there's exit opportunities even if you can't grow, but and then again, if it's a more of a very technical type of a risk startup, there's lots of companies that are in demand of high performing engineers and tech talent, and they'll acquire the company gladly, right? So I think it really just depends.
Got it.
Let's
talk a little bit about getting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. So let's talk a little bit about getting prepared from a founder's perspective. So let's go to Kevin. By the way, Kevin, how's the SPAC world going? Are we do we have another year of a SPAC bubble? What's going on?
I wouldn't call it a bubble, but I would call it's a very exciting industry. And yes. Someone quoted recently that they believe the SPAC total assets is going to go over $1 trillion. It's going to be much bigger than now. So I think it's exciting to be in the SPAC industry, and appreciate very much for the invitation to speak at this summit. Yeah.
Super, Kevin. So Kevin, let's talk a little bit about what can founders do to get prepared for potentially becoming a target of a SPAC? Or maybe from your perspective, what makes a startup company, an InsurTech company, an ideal candidate for a SPAC?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm involved with multiple SPACs, and we've probably met more than 100 target companies, and many of them are InsurTech. And I think this industry is really ready for a major disruption. And what companies, target companies, should be doing, I think, number one is to merge with a SPAC, become a public traded company. It's just like any other IPO. You need to be doing so-called public market ready. What is public market ready? You need a very strong internal control. You need independent board. You need, I would say, a strong, a CFO. And essentially, I think the previous speakers, Brad or Emily, already mentioned about that. To be a public traded company is very different versus a private company. If you are, planning to be, join the SPAC or either way or IPO, you need to do a lot of work. I mean, past 3 years audit, and I think to be audited by a firm PC AOB certified versus I would say non-certified, it would make a big difference. GAAP accounting, and I would say yeah.
Great. So basically, you just want to make sure that you have your act together, well organized, have your numbers, and have the proper size to become a proper target.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
Emily, since you've gone through this process before, the acquisition process, what would you, if you go back in time, what would you have done different in preparation to the acquisition?
Yeah, I think in preparation for the acquisition, I think we did a pretty good job. We had some really good advice. We did a lot of things that Kevin said. I was actually smiling a little bit with some of the financial part, right? You have to button things up and make sure you're from an accounting perspective doing things really to a T. I think that if you think about post acquisition, I have a couple thoughts too. Really, one of the things I would have done differently right after we were acquired is I really wish that we hadn't rushed to merge the teams and integrate the teams right away. So we had a pretty short timeline that we were trying to hit. We merged about 80 employees from Allstate into our company. So it was a little bit of a reverse acquisition, or I'm sorry, a reverse integration of sorts. And I say merging is a lot like marriage. There are personalities at play, there's history, there's expectations. And when two companies come together, you're coming with all of that, right? You've got your history, you've got your expectations, you've got your personalities, or even some of your cultural influence that each company is sort of hired to. The other part of it is that when two companies come together, most of the employees find out rather quickly, right? Like we've got this subset of employees that's working on this deal for months, and then the rest of the employee base finds out all of a sudden. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen quickly. So there's real little time to process for the bulk of the employees, or really to have time to spend together before you kind of put everyone in one big melting pot. So I say pushing the teams together without a courting process can be really difficult on the teams. And I think that the most important groups are really those that are in the trenches, and they need time to work together to kind of aspire towards a shared goal or a shared outcome, and really start to practice this collaborative culture of we instead of us versus them. We made it through that transition. There were rocky points to it, but I think if we just took a little bit more time to get to know each other, understand strengths, opportunities, and also determine what organizational fits were in the right places before we made some big organizational changes, I really think that we would have moved with more velocity once we did fully integrate. The second thing really, oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to ask, in your case, did you actually have a choice in the integration process, a say in the integration process versus Allstate managing the whole process? What was your role and the other founders, and how much input do you have in that? Because it seems to me that that's basically where the sensitivities were, right? And it's true, it's the human factor, right? How do you merge this team? And so how much of a say do you guys have during that process?
You know, we did have a say. It was a very collaborative process. You know, when we going through the sale process, we knew that there was a team that made a ton of sense that we should integrate with. So the concept of whether integrating or not, we were all aligned. We did have a little bit of an expectation of how quickly, but we weren't concerned about it at the time. So it was like, you know, we'd like for this to be done by X, and we thought, okay, yeah, heck, we can do that. Like, we do a lot of things really fast here, and we, you know, just kind of managed through it. So we weren't concerned about sort of the expectation that was set. So we were definitely all in it together. It was a very collaborative process.
Super. Red, let's go to reality check and legalities. I'm assuming that a lot of teams that have or are considering to go in the public route, they probably already have a board, they probably have a in-house legal counsel. How should they work with you? How should that internal team work with a person like you? Brett, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Eric.
No worries.
There are several things to do in regard. As Kevin pointed out, talking about sort of getting ready to go public, you know, whether it's through a SPAC or a traditional IPO process, you know, you have some of the sort of the business and strategic questions to answer. Is this the right time for us to go public? You know, is our business mature enough to do that? And counsel can be helpful in sort of like issue spotting and identifying issues, but counsel can also be helpful in facilitating introductions to investment professionals, consultants, financial advisors who can provide sort of an important business level of advice to determine whether in fact this is the right time, is the market right, etc. But in terms of the legal issues and counsel, one of the most important things in my experience, and I've seen companies that have done a great job of this and not such a great job, is the company review or due diligence is a principal component of going public, particularly in the traditional IPO process. And when the underwriters are engaged and have counsel, they're going to be coming in and looking under the hood and kicking the tires and checking the oil level, et cetera. And it's really important for the company to be ready for that. And make sure that, you know, all of the corporate records are in good shape, that the material contracts have been reviewed and that there aren't any surprises that, you know, could trigger termination rights in the event of an IPO that might constitute a change of control. What's the litigation profile of the company like? You know, is it time to swallow some pride and try to settle and clean up any issues that might be a good idea to get ahead of when you look forward toward the disclosure process and kind of cleaning up the company from a disclosure standpoint. You know, identifying related party transactions. All of this is in an effort to you know, be able to present the company in the best light as it's taken to market. So those, I mean, I think those, you know, in terms of, you mentioned the sort of counsel gets involved in negotiating some of the important transaction documents, you know, such as the underwriting agreement in case of an IPO. In terms of pricing, that's really not a legal matter. You know, the way that an IPO, for example, is priced is that the lead underwriters will take the company and management on an extensive road show. They'll meet with multiple investors. And at the conclusion of that, the underwriters will meet with, you know, the company's senior management and assess where the interest is in the investor field, usually within a range that's set forth on the cover of the preliminary prospectus. And that decision is made sort of by the company ultimately, but, you know, through the advice and discussion of the underwriter. So,
yes. And I'm just going to add my 2 cents to this part of the conversation is that from my experience dealing with many founders, being an investor and also having been a founder myself, I think it's important for founders to understand that not all lawyers serve the same purpose. And even though you might have a lawyer that might have done your corporation in Delaware, it doesn't mean that's the right person to start dealing with your potential IPO or acquisition. That's why you have specialized law firms and people like Breck, who are securities specialists, who you will need to reach out to. And I think that it's really funny that this idea of being lean and entrepreneurial, sometimes people try to carry that all the way down to a process that is very serious and very complex as this one. And I think it's important to know that you need to hire the right people at the right time. And for this purpose, it's quite important. So let's talk a little bit about, and we touched on this already, about culture and business control, and definitely the moment that you go public or you become an acquisition target, for founders, it must be quite concerning what happens next, right? So Emily, can you just share a little bit of your experience on what, let's put this into two perspectives: a positive, not a negative, but definitely the pluses and minuses, right? So how can you, or can you just talk a little bit about the strategic advantages of being acquired by a carrier, but also the challenges that presents itself?
Yes, happy to. So I think there's a few strategic advantages. I mean, the first is financial stability and strength. You know, especially with a company the size of Allstate, very financially strong company, lots of capital to deploy, looking to, for ways to invest in businesses that are growing like ours. So, you leave a startup culture where you're constantly concerned about, growth and cash flow and all of that. That all goes away, which really allows you to just focus on growing the business. Also, strategic alignment. That was really important to us as we were thinking about, what our future was going to look like. We talked to VC firms, we talked to strategics, and the alignment between the acquirer and the acquiree is so important. Just like where's the enterprise going, right? And obviously, Allstate's strategic plans is just to protect people, and people are in the good hands, and we're constantly looking for ways to bring this circle of protection around individuals and families. Well, that's our whole mantra as well, right? Individual protection for identities and data protection. So strategic alignment and being able to kind of be another part of that, or kind of be on the peripheral or even a central part of a large business's strategic plans is big. And then customer reach, obviously huge. 100 million policyholders at Allstate. Like, there's so much opportunity to integrate the what we do into what the core products are. And then of course, brand strength was huge for us. You going out and trying to tell people you want to protect them and collecting really sensitive information, but you're a $20 million business. It's like kind of hard, right? No one knows who you are, and no one can really prove that you are doing what you say you're doing until you prove it over time. And obviously, the brand that you get when you're acquired by a large carrier is also really helpful. Now, the hard part is that you're a small company going into a large enterprise, and I think that I think that you have to really be careful and specific about integration. And I would say this, I would preach this from the mountaintops if I had this all to do all over again. You have to be very careful and specific about integration. Each party needs to have an opportunity to say what's important, right? You need to have like this really, really blunt conversation. This is important to us and this is why. This is important to us and this is why. And then align on a plan, prioritize that plan, and then not revisit it every 2 weeks, right? You've got a plan. Hey, we already decided what we're doing and why. We've deprioritized this and this is why. And we're working the plan. So I think that, absent, you've got, I call it actually, with my experience, it felt like a really big bear hug. Bear hugs are awesome. Bear hugs are comfy, they're warm, they're fuzzy, but they can be really strong. And, you kind of like need a little bit of space. And so I think that any advice I could give is like, give a nice bear hug, but like kind of, don't squeeze too hard, let people kind of settle in and really decide what integration points are going to be most important and when.
That's a great advice, especially for acquiring companies. What about for other founders? This is a very emotional subject, right? The culture is your identity. What do you needed to do yourself, your co-founders, to move forward, especially through the challenging integration points? Anything that you can give advice to your fund, the other founders here in the group. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say culture is number one. It always is. Culture is number one. Startups are successful because they have a specific culture. And it's a culture that people can rally around and literally give their lives for over a period of time. It has to be a good culture, and whatever good means to you is what it means to you. But you have to have that. When the culture starts to falter, the top line suffers, and the bottom line, quite frankly. But and so I'd say the most important thing is if you're thinking about being acquired, or you're interviewing companies, or you're talking to businesses, ensure the acquiring company and your business have alignment in your culture and your core values. And without those goalposts or the North Star of behavioral expectations, it would be extremely too difficult to navigate integration. It's to navigate growth, to navigate, who's in charge. There's a lot of you've got founders that have come in and they've not had bosses for 10, 12, 14 years. And all of a sudden there's people telling them what they want from them, or telling them what to do or how to do it. And I'll just give you a really quick example. Pre-acquisition in 2018, we were a fairly small company, 100 employees, 60 million of revenue. We joined a $30 billion market cap company, right? So think about just the processes, the maturity and the processes of the two businesses. And post-transaction, there could be a lot of expectations about how do you get those processes from the acquired company mature, and how long is it going to take? And it can be very disruptive. Granted, maturing processes is a good thing, so everyone should always be on board on that, but it can also be very disruptive. But if you have the right core values, you have aligned shared purpose, you have all of that at the center of all of your conversations, things like seeking first to understand, everyone's a leader, putting the customer first. If you have those things that are already aligned, and you don't have to establish cultural norms together, you can actually put a manageable integration plan together. And so I think that, having that alignment, figuring out how we're going to work together, and evaluating kind of the risks and the downfalls of how you actually may push things off and all that. If you can do that in a collaborative way, and I would also say fight to protect your unique culture. Even if you join a company that has a great culture, you have a unique culture, and the people that are with you want to keep that unique culture. So fight for it, push hard for it, and push hard against things that might detract from it.
Got it. So Kevin, you are on the other side of the coin. You heard from a founder. Same topic, same question. How do you guys manage or make sure that entrepreneurial companies that you acquire continue with the same culture? If maybe that's not what you want them to do or not, but just be candid about it. How do you manage that?
Sure. I mean, Emily really gave a great speech. And I guess, for SPAC, in fact, I think it's a little easier in the sense that usually the target company will keep all the management. They're still in control. And what SPAC would add is really, I would say, a kind of bigger board and more, I would say, industry experience, more capital. But the original target company will be, be an independent entity and will keep its culture. So I would say it's, the integration part, it's probably much easier. It's more about, adding some board member instead of, a team merger. And of course, I'm biased, but I think to me, when I look at, a lot of deals being done, I would say really, as we are in a kind of golden age of the companies that unicorns go IPO, become public traded company. I think the investors are hungry for top quality, good companies go IPO independently or through a SPAC or direct listing. But I would say, to be an independent company, public traded company, that's a major accomplishment. And also, I would say, personally, I think it probably would be better for a lot of firms versus being acquired by a strategic and to be, rolled into a conglomerate that you'll be, one of 30,000 people versus, an independent company that be continuing growing. And don't forget that what I noticed also is, I would say a lot of those, I would say target companies, private companies, when when they go IPO, right, they already know the industry very well, and they most likely post, let's say SPAC merger, post business combination, after they started trading, they will be immediately looking for growth by basically making more add-on acquisitions. And so because being a public traded company, you can issue stocks and you got currency to, it's liquid, it's available. And you see actually companies go much faster post the business combination. So it's actually a very good thing that to be in control of your destiny, I would say. And, for the InsurTech company executives, please give us a call. We love to talk to all the target companies. Yes.
Awesome. Brett, the final question is for you. By the way, this question is interesting because it just shows you that people want to have a cake and eat it too, right? So are there any legal protections that the management team can use to maintain control after the IPO or acquisition?
Well, there are, okay. I mean, when a company, I guess I could answer this mostly, in the context of becoming a public company. When you become a public company, in order to satisfy the listing requirements for stock exchanges, you need to make sure that you have a majority independent board. And so, with an independent board, you're hopefully going to sail the ship in the right direction. Now, what's, in the past to ward off unwanted takeover overtures or activists, some companies have, tried to implement some devices to sort of secure and maintain the control, the board control. And I think that what you can get away with, so to speak, on that when you go public is a function of what the market will bear. I mean, as one example I like to use, kind of it's the far end of the spectrum, is when Snap went public in 2017 or so. They issued non-voting stock to the public stockholders. And so the people who bought in had zero control even over the election of the board. Contrast that with sort of what's considered to be good governance today, which is you re-elect the entire board every year at the annual meeting. So in between those two ends, some companies have staggered boards in which they elect a third of their board every year, every third year, making it more difficult to replace a control position on the board. There are poison pills that can be plans that can be implemented that would deter an unwanted takeover offer or even supermajority votes, as a lot of the tech companies had when they went public, to sort of concentrate control in the founders. So I think it kind of depends on if you're going public traditionally, your underwriter will weigh in on what they think is going to make your company the most marketable, and it may mean not having a lot of those protections.
Yeah, I think it's important for founders to realize that yes, there might be a lot of legal protections that you might implement, but each of those can make your deal fail, not go through, or just make your organization not appealing to different types of acquisition people. So closing on this topic, guys, please, each of you, if you can share one key takeaway for our founders on today's event, that would be amazing. Let's start with Emily, then follow Kevin, then Ben, and finally Brett.
Perfect. So my advice is be patient and don't settle if it doesn't feel right, and take care of your people along the way.
Great. Kevin.
Sure, totally agree. I guess I would say go SPAC, go IPO, go direct listing.
Go SPAC and don't go back.
Yes, this market, I think it's great, and I think people are rewarding the entrepreneurs, the founders, and I think should go for it. Yeah.
Awesome, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's interesting sitting in my position on this panel because we have, a founder acquired and Kevin who's doing his own SPAC and Brett who's, taking lots of companies public. And so I think it's listening to all of them that it just reminds me of, for options. I think this is such a hot market right now, and there's so many. And I think a lot of companies, especially in InsurTech space, at IPO did very well. Maybe some of them haven't performed quite as well in the following months, but I think it's consider all your options and really have a strategy around this, right? Have these conversations a year before you're even thinking about an exit. If that's whether an IPO or a SPAC, or if people start knocking on your door. I think it's really important to have a strategy around this, especially as a CEO of a company. It's this is a really big part of your job, right? So I think it's spend time. I think short on bandwidth, but it's worth the time.
Great, Brett.
Just as an aside, there's a funny Monty Python skit where a group of people are on the table and they've been asked to criticize their CEO who's sitting right in front of them. And so they all dance around it, and it gets to Brett, the last guy, and he says, well, with the Monty Python accent, I agree with them all. So I would say that, planning and knowing what it's going to take to get to that exit threshold, whether it's IPO, acquisition, SPAC IPO, growth capital, figuring that out in advance and having that be your mission to get there is a much better way to go about it than just waking up one day and saying, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could do an exit right now? So.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Eric. Thank you, panel. That was a great informative session. I know we ran a little bit over, but because of the great content there, how could you not? I think that was a great another information gathering. And let me take off my ways because it's not getting me to the public markets I was thinking, but really a journey for us to get to how these SPACs, IPOs, acquisitions go. Now, going to our next session, are you guys ready? It's network time. As we get there, let me give you a quick update of how we do it. Just a reminder, we have 3 floors of networking. The first floor has the 7 insurance corporate investors. The second floor has another 7. Then the third floor is 100% open for networking for everyone, and also has a tech lounge if you run into any issues. The networking starts now and I end at 5 o'clock. But before I go there, let's go to the next slide real quick. And I want to tell you that the other navigation tips is make sure you have your audio and video on. Double click to move from one table to another. That's the easiest way to do it. And if you want to take a break, just go to the 3rd floor. Otherwise, and we do that because we want others to get to the tables. So you can move yourself to the table so everybody can get there. So you're probably wondering, where is Tony? Well, he's behind the curtain with David and our other amazing team running this event. He'll be on the floor too, and you can go find him like Waldo. But if you want to seek help, like Tony and others, we have this InsurTech New York logo. That person can help you on the floor. There's also a tech lounge, like I said, on the 3rd floor. And if you need more help, you can email us at help@InsurTech New York. Now, when you go to the floor, brace yourself. You might not know where you are, but just double click on the left side, you know where you are. I really appreciate having this opportunity to be a host again and your patience for the way I mispronounce everything. On behalf of InsurTech New York, thanks for being part of the community, and look to see you for the next event. Now, just get out there and go to the floor. Have fun.